Maid's daughter gave a secret hand signal to police dog. The dog's reaction shocked everyone. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now let's dive into the story. It all began on a crisp autumn morning. The sun filtered through the large windows of the Vance mansion, casting a warm golden glow on the marble floors. The mansion was a sight to behold, a symbol of wealth and power. But behind its grandiose facade, there was a story unfolding that no one could have predicted. In one of the mansion's quiet corners, a young girl sat alone, barely noticeable to anyone passing by. She was the maid's daughter, a girl who had grown used to being invisible in a house filled with the finest things money could buy. Her name was Lily, but to everyone in the mansion, she was nothing more than the help's child. Lily had seen it all, the disdain, the careless words, the cold stares. But she had learned long ago that it was best to stay out of sight, to be silent and unnoticed. That day, however, would be different. Lily sat on a small, worn stool in the corner of the grand hallway, trying to keep her focus on the book in her hands. The pages were old, but it was the only escape she had. Her mother had told her to stay out of trouble, to remain invisible. But that was before she saw the dog. A police dog, trained to sniff out danger, was stationed in the mansion for a special event. The dog had been brought in by the family's security team, but to Lily, the dog was more than just a trained animal. It was a lifeline. She had a secret. Something no one knew about her. Something that, if revealed, could change everything. Lily had grown up with a love for animals, especially dogs. Her mother had once worked for a dog trainer, and Lily had spent many hours watching the dogs learn, understanding the subtle ways they communicated. And that day, as the police dog passed by, Lily's heart skipped a beat. She couldn't help herself. Without thinking, she raised her hand, giving a subtle, almost imperceptible signal. The dog froze, its sharp eyes locking onto hers. In that moment, Lily knew she had made contact. The dog, trained to respond to commands, had understood her signal. Lily's pulse quickened as the dog walked over to her, its tail wagging in recognition. For a moment, it was as if the world had paused. She was no longer just the maid's daughter, the invisible child in the mansion. She was someone with a secret, someone with power. No one could see the connection between them, but Lily felt it. The dog was her ally, and she had just unlocked its attention in a way no one else could. The sound of footsteps interrupted her moment of triumph. A member of the security team was walking toward her, his eyes narrowing as he saw the dog's behavior. He had no idea what had just happened. Neither did the family or the staff. Lily's secret was safe, for now. But what would happen if they found out? As Lily sat there, still feeling the pulse of connection with the police dog, she tried to focus on the task at hand. She was supposed to remain invisible, to be nothing more than the maid's daughter who cleaned and served. But today something felt different. The dog's response to her signal had been instinctive and immediate, something she had never seen before, even in the most highly trained animals. It had looked at her, as if understanding the silent message she had sent. Her heart raced, and for a brief moment, Lily felt powerful, like she held a secret that could change everything. But then, the world came rushing back to her. The distant sound of footsteps approached from down the hall. Lily snapped her gaze back to her book, her heart still pounding. She knew she had to remain unnoticed, but the exhilaration lingered. The footsteps stopped right near her. "What are you doing here?" A voice, sharp and cold, snapped at her. Lily glanced up and saw one of the mansion's security guards, Officer Matthews. His expression was a mix of confusion and irritation, as if he had seen a ghost. "I was just reading, sir," Lily responded. Quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. Officer Matthews raised an eyebrow. "Reading?" He looked at the book in her hands. It was an old, tattered copy of a children's novel. Hardly the book of a child who belonged in a place like this. "You know the rules, don't you?" he added, his tone becoming more condescending. "You're not supposed to be out here. Go back to the kitchen where you belong." Lily's face burned with embarrassment. She nodded quickly and stood up. But as she turned to walk away, she couldn't help but glance back at the police dog. The dog was now sitting quietly near a corner of the hallway, its eyes trained on her. Lily's heart skipped a beat, but she kept walking. The mansion was huge. Its marble floors and towering ceilings always made her feel small. She walked through the grand hallway, where portraits of the family hung on the walls, watching her with their cold, indifferent eyes. The house was quiet, except for the muffled voices from the other side of the building. Lily reached the kitchen, where her mother was busy chopping vegetables, her movements precise and practiced. Her mother glanced up when she entered, giving her a small smile. "How are you, sweetheart?" she asked, her voice soft. "I'm fine, Mom," Lily replied, trying to sound normal, though her mind was still racing. She couldn't stop thinking about the dog, about the way it had reacted to her signal. It wasn't just a coincidence. It was as if the dog understood her, as if it had been waiting for someone to reach out. But what did it mean? Lily couldn't know for sure. All she knew was that the mansion, for all its grandeur, felt more and more like a cage to her. Her mother had worked here for years, but even she had never dared to step out of line. The family's wealth and power were undeniable, and anyone who crossed them faced consequences. Lily's mother had taught her to be careful, to stay in the background, and keep her head down. And for most of her life, that had been enough. But now, something had changed. She could feel it in the air, like a storm was brewing just beneath the surface. She had to be cautious. Her mother had warned her about this before. People like the Vance family didn't take kindly to surprises. They liked things to stay predictable, controllable. The last thing she wanted was to draw attention to herself. But that dog, that strange connection she felt, it was something she couldn't ignore. It was almost like the dog had understood her desperation, her need to prove herself. Lily felt a flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, she could make a difference here. She didn't know how yet, but she would figure it out. She had to. Ivy couldn't stop thinking about the dog. It wasn't just an animal. It had felt like an ally, a silent companion, something or someone who had understood her in a way no one else had. But as she walked back to the kitchen that day, the weight of the mansion's towering walls felt heavier than ever. It wasn't just the cold marble floors or the expensive paintings on the walls. It was the constant reminder that she didn't belong here. She was just the maid's daughter. The servants were invisible in the world of the Vance family. And yet, there had been that moment with the dog. She had felt seen, in a way that almost seemed impossible. That night, as the mansion quieted down, Ivy couldn't shake the thought of the dog's reaction to her hand signal. She was lying in her tiny room, the thin walls doing little to block out the sounds of the Vance family's late-night conversations from down the hall. She heard their voices drifting through the corridor, but they weren't talking about anything that concerned her. All she could think about was the dog, the connection that had passed between them. Her heart still pounded when she thought about it. It had been subtle, but the dog had responded. What if that was the sign she'd been waiting for? What if this dog, this seemingly ordinary animal, could help her uncover the secrets the Vance family was hiding? She turned over in her bed, unable to sleep. The air was cool in her small room, but it was the unease that kept her awake. She had always been taught to keep her head down, to avoid standing out. But that moment with the dog had sparked something deep inside her. She was tired of being invisible. Ivy knew that if she was ever going to change her life, she had to start taking control. The next day, she woke up early and found her way to the kitchen. Her mother, as always, was already hard at work, preparing breakfast for the family. "Morning, sweetie," her mother said, glancing up with a warm smile. Ivy forced a smile in return, but she couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted within her. The world outside the kitchen seemed different, larger, almost as if she could finally see the edges of it. As she helped her mother set the table, Ivy caught a glimpse of the police dog in the yard, resting under a large oak tree. Her heart skipped a beat. She had to know if the dog could really be trusted. It wasn't just about the signal anymore. It was about something bigger, something she could no longer ignore. She needed to test it. Ivy knew the family was getting ready for a major event later that day, a party, one of many the Vance family held to maintain their social image. She had heard them talking about it for weeks. She knew it would be full of powerful people, influential figures from all over the city. And she knew this was her chance. If she could get the dog to respond again, it might be the key she needed. She had to be careful, though. There was always someone watching in the mansion. She couldn't risk being seen talking to the dog in such a conspicuous way. But as she watched the dog, She knew that she had to act fast. The mansion was about to become a flurry of activity, and if she didn't take this opportunity, it could be weeks before she could get another chance. She waited until the evening, when the house was busy preparing for the event. People moved in and out, and the kitchen buzzed with the sound of servants running back and forth. Ivy quietly slipped outside and made her way to the yard where the dog was lying. Her heart pounded in her chest. This was it. She approached slowly, trying to remain calm, but the excitement was almost too much to contain. The dog looked up as she approached, its eyes sharp and aware. Ivy took a deep breath and raised her hand, giving the secret signal once again. This time, the dog didn't hesitate. It stood up, its tail wagging, and moved toward her. The connection was undeniable. This was no accident. Ivy had just unlocked something that would change everything. Ivy could feel her heart pounding in her chest as she stood there in the yard, the police dog now at her side. The connection she had felt earlier was stronger than ever. It was as if the dog had recognized her not just as the maid's daughter, but as something more. A moment of power. She had expected something, but not this level of understanding, of trust. She slowly reached out her hand, her fingers trembling slightly, and the dog gently nuzzled it. This was no ordinary moment. This was a sign. But as the dog looked up at her, Ivy knew it was not enough to just feel seen. The world of the Vance family was far more complicated than she could have ever imagined, and she needed more than just a connection with an animal to change her life. She needed answers. As she stood there in the yard, surrounded by the sprawling mansion, Ivy's mind raced. She had overheard bits and pieces of conversations over the past few weeks. There were murmurs about a big event, one that was supposed to elevate the Vance family's status even further. An exclusive gala. Ivy wasn't supposed to know much about it, but she had caught a few words from the staff when they thought she wasn't listening. There was talk about an important guest, someone with a lot of power in the city, and Ivy knew that whatever was happening at this gala would change everything. She needed to get inside, to understand what was really going on in the Vance family's world. Ivy felt a sense of urgency. She had to do something with the secret she now carried, the connection with the dog. It wasn't just about helping her get noticed. It was about finding a way to stop something before it happened. She had no proof yet, but she had seen the way the family treated the staff, the way they dismissed their own employees like they were invisible. It wasn't just about mistreatment. It was about something darker, something that could be dangerous. The Vance family was hiding something, and Ivy had to find out what. The night of the gala arrived. The mansion was filled with guests, the air buzzing with the sound of laughter, clinking glasses, and distant music. Ivy could barely contain her excitement. She had been tasked with setting up the rooms and preparing food, but this time, she was paying attention. Her eyes scanned the crowd, watching as the guests mingled, oblivious to the world just outside their bubble. Ivy's heart raced as she navigated through the rooms, trying to find a way to get closer to the people who held the answers she needed. The dog was still there, watching from a distance, but Ivy knew she couldn't rely on it alone. She had to find the truth herself. As the night wore on, Ivy spotted something unusual. A small group of men, dressed in dark suits, were gathered in a corner of the room, speaking in hushed tones. Ivy moved closer, pretending to adjust a nearby vase, but her ears strained to catch any words. She caught bits and pieces. "It's all set," one man said. "The deal will go through tonight." Ivy's heart stopped. A deal? What kind of deal were they talking about? She had to know. Ivy took a deep breath and approached the group, trying to stay out of sight. The shadows in the corner provided her with just enough cover. She had to hear more. The dog's presence lingered in her mind, a reminder that she had an ally in this place, but she couldn't rely on it. She needed more information. She could feel the tension in the air as the men continued to talk. Their words were becoming clearer now. Ivy could barely keep her breath steady as she realized what she was hearing. The Vance family was involved in something dangerous, and it was all going to unfold that very night. Ivy stood there, her heart racing as the pieces of the conversation she overheard started to make sense. The deal. The men in the corner. Her mind was spinning. She had to know more. She had to find out what they were talking about before it was too late. The room was filled with the sound of clinking glasses and soft laughter, but Ivy's focus was sharp. She moved away from the group of men, trying to act as if she was just another servant, adjusting a vase or fixing a table. Her thoughts were racing. Who were these men? What deal were they making? And what did it mean for her? As she walked through the crowd, she caught a glimpse of her mother in the distance. She was busy serving drinks to some of the guests, her expression carefully neutral. Ivy's stomach twisted. She had always admired her mother's strength, how she was able to navigate this world of privilege without letting it break her. But Ivy could see the toll it had taken. The quiet exhaustion in her mother's eyes, the way she held herself as though every moment was a battle. Ivy had always been invisible in this world, but now, she felt like she was seeing it for what it truly was. The Vance family wasn't just wealthy, they were dangerous. And tonight, Ivy realized, they were making a deal that could change everything. She needed to act fast. As the evening wore on, the tension in the air seemed to grow. The men in the corner had moved, but Ivy could feel the weight of their words hanging in the air. She couldn't stop thinking about the dog. The connection they had shared earlier that day. It felt like a sign, a signal that there was more to her role in the mansion than just cleaning and serving. Ivy had never felt this way before. She had always been told to keep her head down, to stay out of the way, but now, everything was different. The world was shifting around her, and she needed to find her place in it. But how? As she was lost in thought, a figure suddenly appeared in front of her. It was Officer Matthews, the same security guard who had spoken to her earlier. His eyes locked onto hers, and for a brief moment, Ivy felt a cold shiver run down her spine. "You," he said, his voice low and firm. "What are you doing here?" Ivy's mind raced. She couldn't afford to be caught. Not now, not with everything at stake. Just checking the glasses, sir," she said quickly, trying to keep her voice steady. Officer Matthews didn't look convinced, but he didn't press further. He just nodded curtly and walked away. Ivy let out a breath she didn't realize she was holding. That had been too close. She had to be more careful. The party was in full swing now, but Ivy wasn't focused on the guests. She was focused on the deal, on what she had to do next. She needed to find out exactly what was going on. But how? She glanced over at the police dog, who was now resting quietly by the door. The dog had become her ally, a symbol of the connection she had to something greater than herself. Maybe, just maybe, the dog could help her get the answers she needed. Ivy made up her mind. She would not let the Vance family control her life any longer. She would uncover the truth. The night was far from over, and there was still so much left to discover. The question was, how far was she willing to go to find out the truth? Ivy's heart raced as she stood in the shadows of the mansion's grand hall, watching the guests move about in their elegant outfits, each one playing their part in the night's performance. She had always felt like a ghost in this world, invisible and silent, but tonight was different. She wasn't just watching anymore. She was planning. The Vance family had always held power over her life, but now she could feel the grip loosening. She knew she couldn't go back to being just the maid's daughter. She had to find out what the Vance family was hiding, and she needed to do it before it was too late. She glanced over at the police dog, who was now resting near the door, its alert eyes scanning the room. She couldn't help but feel a sense of reassurance from the dog's presence. It had become her ally, a quiet force of support in a world where she had few allies. Ivy's thoughts were interrupted when she noticed a group of people entering the room. They were not guests, at least, not the kind of guests Ivy had seen before. These men were dressed in dark suits, their faces stern and unreadable. They moved with purpose, their eyes scanning the room, their presence commanding attention. Ivy's instincts flared. Something wasn't right. She had seen these men before. At least, she had seen one of them. He was the man she had overheard talking about the deal. His name was Robert Calder, a powerful businessman with ties to the Vance family. She had heard whispers about him, how he controlled everything in the city, how his wealth and influence stretched far beyond what most people could comprehend. And now here he was, walking through the mansion as if it was his own. Ivy felt a shiver run down her spine. She couldn't let these men see her. She ducked behind a nearby pillar, her heart pounding in her chest as she tried to remain out of sight. The men stopped near the center of the room, where they were greeted by the Vance family. Ivy watched as Robert Calder exchanged a few words with Charles Vance, the head of the family, before the group made their way to the back of the mansion. Ivy's curiosity burned. What were they talking about? What was the deal they had made? She knew she had to follow them, but she couldn't risk being caught. She waited for a moment, then slipped through the crowd, keeping her distance as she followed them down the long hallway. She was careful to stay out of sight, her footsteps quiet on the polished floors. The sound of muffled voices grew louder as she approached a door at the end of the hall. She pressed her ear against it, listening intently. What she heard next made her blood run cold. "It's all set," Robert Calder said, his voice low and confident. "The deal goes through tomorrow. Once it's done, no one can stop us." Ivy's breath caught in her throat. The deal. It wasn't just about power, it was about something bigger, something that would change everything. She had to know more. She couldn't let them get away with it. The sound of footsteps drew closer, and Ivy quickly backed away, hiding in the shadows. Her mind raced. She had to figure out what was going on, and she had to do it fast. The dog, her secret ally, might be able to help, but she had to stay focused. The Vance family was up to something dangerous, and she couldn't afford to waste any more time. With a deep breath, Ivy made her decision. She would find a way to expose the truth, no matter what it took. Ivy's heart pounded as she stood in the shadows, the weight of the conversation she had overheard echoing in her mind. Robert Calder, the powerful businessman, had just confirmed what she had feared. This deal wasn't just about money. It was about control, power, and something much darker than she had ever imagined. The Vance family was involved in something dangerous, something that could hurt not only the people in this mansion, but also those outside it. She had to act, and she had to act fast. The hallway was quiet now, but Ivy knew she couldn't stand still for long. She had overheard enough to know that the deal would happen tomorrow, but what exactly was it? What was going to take place, and who would be hurt by it? She had to get to the bottom of it. Ivy quickly retreated from the door, moving cautiously back down the hall. She had to figure out what to do next. The mansion, with its endless corridors and opulent rooms, seemed like a maze. But Ivy knew it better than anyone. She had spent years walking its halls, cleaning its rooms, and listening to its secrets. Now, she needed to use that knowledge to her advantage. She glanced back at the police dog, who was still resting near the door. Her mind raced. The dog had reacted to her before, and now, it felt like her only ally in this mansion of secrets. But how could she use the dog to help her uncover the truth? Ivy's thoughts were interrupted by a soft noise coming from the other end of the hallway. It was faint, but she could hear footsteps approaching. She quickly ducked into a nearby room, pressing herself against the wall to stay hidden. The footsteps grew louder, and soon, she saw a figure pass by the doorway. It was Officer Matthews, the same security guard who had confronted her earlier. Ivy held her breath, hoping he wouldn't see her. He didn't, but she knew she couldn't afford to stay hidden for long. She had to move before anyone realized she was there. Slowly, she crept out of the room and made her way toward the staff quarters. She had to talk to her mother. She had to tell her what she had overheard, but she also knew that her mother might not believe her. After all, Ivy had always been the invisible one, the girl who cleaned the rooms and served the meals. She wasn't supposed to be part of the world that the Vance family inhabited, but this time, it was different. Ivy had the truth, and she couldn't keep it to herself. As she approached the kitchen, she saw her mother standing by the stove, stirring a pot of soup. Her mother looked up, surprised to see her. "Ivy, what's wrong?" she asked, her voice soft. Ivy hesitated for a moment, unsure of how to explain. "I need to talk to you," she said quietly. Her mother frowned, but nodded, wiping her hands on her apron. "Come with me." Ivy followed her mother into the small storage room in the back of the kitchen. It was quiet there, away from the noise of the party. Ivy took a deep breath before speaking. "Mom, there's something going on. I overheard a conversation. The Vance family is involved in something. A deal, and it's happening tomorrow. I don't know what it is, but it's bad. I think they're going to hurt people." Her mother stared at her for a long moment, as if trying to process what Ivy was saying. "You don't know what you're talking about," her mother said softly. "You must have misunderstood." Ivy shook her head, her eyes wide with fear. "No, Mom. I heard them. They're planning something big. They can't just get away with it." Her mother's face softened, but Ivy could see the worry in her eyes. "Ivy, we can't get involved. You don't know what they're capable of. We have to be careful." But Ivy wasn't listening. She couldn't. The truth was out there, and she couldn't ignore it. "I'm not going to sit by and do nothing," she said firmly. "I'm going to stop them, even if it means I have to do it alone." Her mother looked at her, fear and concern etched on her face. "You don't understand, Ivy. They will destroy us if we get in their way." But Ivy had already made up her mind. She wasn't going to let the Vance family control her life any longer. She had seen enough, and now she was going to expose the truth. She just had to figure out how. Ivy stood in the dimly lit storage room, her breath quick and shallow. Her mother's words echoed in her mind. But Ivy couldn't shake the feeling that this was her moment. This was the tipping point. She could no longer turn a blind eye to the truth. The Vance family was not just wealthy. They were tangled in something much darker, something that needed to be exposed. She had already heard enough to understand that the stakes were high, and if she didn't act soon, it might be too late. I'm going to do something about it, Ivy repeated softly, more to herself than to her mother. Her mother sighed, rubbing her temple as if she could erase the fear in Ivy's voice. You don't understand what you're up against, Ivy. This isn't some story you can just walk into. The Vance family has connections, power, and resources. They can ruin us. Ivy felt a surge of frustration, but tried to keep her voice steady. I can't just ignore it. What if they hurt someone? What if they get away with it? I have to stop them. I don't care what they can do. I won't let them win. Her mother looked at her with a mixture of concern and resignation, but she didn't argue further. Instead, she put a hand on Ivy's shoulder, her grip firm but gentle. Be careful, Ivy. You're not the only one watching. You can't trust anyone here. Not anymore. The words stung, but Ivy didn't flinch. She knew her mother was scared, but Ivy's mind was made up. The Vance family had taken everything from them. It was time to take it back. The gala was in full swing. The sounds of laughter, clinking glasses, and soft music filled the air as Ivy moved through the crowd, her heart racing with every step. She was blending in, like she had always been told to do, but this time it was different. This time, she wasn't invisible. She was watching, waiting for the right moment. She needed to find the truth, and she needed to find it before the night was over. The police dog had become her ally, her silent companion in the shadows. She had no idea how, but she felt certain that the dog would play a part in uncovering the Vance family's secrets. She couldn't do it alone, and for the first time, she didn't want to. As she made her way toward the back of the mansion, she noticed Robert Calder, the businessman she had overheard earlier, talking with Charles Vance. The two men were standing in a private corner, away from the guests, and Ivy knew that something important was happening. She had to get closer. She moved silently, weaving through the guests until she was just a few feet away from them. She could hear their conversation now. The words sharp and calculated. Tomorrow, Robert Calder said, his voice low. Everything will be in place. The final step is just a formality. Ivy's heart skipped a beat. What were they talking about? What was the final step? She couldn't hear everything, but she knew it was enough to confirm her suspicions. Whatever this deal was, it was going to change everything. She needed to get more information, but how? Just as she was about to move closer, the sound of footsteps interrupted her thoughts. She turned to see Officer Matthews walking down the hallway, his eyes scanning the crowd. Ivy's heart stopped. She had to act fast. She ducked behind a pillar, praying he wouldn't see her. Officer Matthews passed by, oblivious to her presence. Ivy exhaled slowly, her mind racing. She couldn't waste any more time. She had to figure out what the Vance family was hiding. She had to expose the truth, no matter the cost. Ivy's heart raced as she carefully moved toward the back of the mansion, the tension of the night wrapping around her like a cloak. The conversation she had overheard between Robert Calder and Charles Vance still echoed in her mind. The deal. The final step. What could it mean? She had to know. She had to be sure that what she had uncovered was the truth. As she neared the hallway where she had last seen the two men, she suddenly stopped. The air felt thicker now, charged with anticipation. Her instincts were screaming at her that time was running out. She needed to act fast. The gala was in full swing, but Ivy wasn't part of the celebration. She was invisible in the crowd, just another servant blending into the opulence that surrounded her. But inside, she was no longer the maid's daughter. She was someone with a purpose. She had a secret, and that secret had the power to change everything. She glanced back at the police dog, who sat in the corner of the hall, its eyes scanning the guests. Ivy's mind raced. If the dog could truly help her, it had to be now. She was running out of time. The guests were getting more restless. The music was getting louder. Soon, the event would be over, and the opportunity to stop whatever was coming would be gone. She looked around, her eyes catching sight of a staff door slightly ajar, leading into the kitchen area. That was where she needed to go. She had overheard enough to know that the deal had something to do with a major transfer of power, and it wasn't going to end well. The family was hiding something much darker than just wealth. It was control, manipulation, and a willingness to do anything to stay at the top. Ivy couldn't let that happen. She had to stop them. Without thinking twice, she made her move. She quickly slipped into the kitchen area, where the hustle and bustle of the staff distracted her from being noticed. She had a plan in mind. The police dog could help. Ivy had learned enough from her time working around these people. She knew that the power was not just in the hands of the Vance family. It was in the hands of the information that could expose them. She needed to get that information, and fast. Ivy found her way to the storage room where the files were kept. Her breath quickened. There they were, just behind the locked door. But she wasn't alone. The sound of footsteps approached. She froze. Officer Matthews, the same guard who had been watching her earlier, was walking toward her. She held her breath, praying he wouldn't see her. The guard passed by without a second glance. Ivy let out a silent sigh of relief. She had to get in and out of there quickly. With steady hands, she opened the door and started sifting through the files. Her heart was pounding. She needed to find the one thing that would expose the Vance family's entire plan, their secret. She found it. A file with names and dates, links to shady business deals, and illegal contracts. This was it. This was the key to everything. Ivy's mind raced. She could already feel the weight of the truth pressing down on her. She had it. Proof of the Vance family's corruption. Proof of the deal that would change the city. She tucked the file under her arm and made her way back toward the door, her pulse quickening with each step. She was almost there. But just as she reached the door, she heard it. A voice, cold and authoritative. "Stop right there." Ivy froze. She turned slowly to see Robert Calder standing in the doorway, a smirk playing across his lips. "I knew. Someone would try to stop this," he said, his tone dripping with arrogance. Ivy's heart sank. She had been caught. But she didn't flinch. She couldn't. Not now. "You're too late," he continued, his voice low. "This deal is already set in motion. There's nothing you can do to stop it." Ivy's eyes narrowed. "We'll see about that."